Good evening and welcome to Who Corner to Corner. I'm one of your two hosts. My name is Geoff and I'm joined as always by my good friend Paul.
Yeah, hello, that's me. I'm one of the other hosts, actually.
I've just established there's two hosts and now you've implied there's more than. The multi-host of madness.
Multi-dimensional podcasting, mate. That's what it is.
So we're going back in time tonight, aren't we? We're looking back at the Seventh Doctor adventure Dragonfire tonight. And this is in preparation for what we've got coming out next week, which is our very special podcast episode, which is our chat with Sophie Aldred.
Aldred. We
chatted to Ace. You were. Well, we were both very excited about that, but it was particularly special for you, wasn't it? Yeah.
My excitometer was up through the roof.
So yeah, we had a really good time on that. So yeah, keep an eye out for that next week. So this episode then, it's Ace's first episode, isn't it? And also Mel, who's played by Bonnie Langford,
Bonnie Langford.
And her last episode, So, Paul, why don't you fill us in on the rough plot for this episode for anyone who hasn't seen this one before?
The plot, such as it is. No, actually, there is quite a strong plot to this one. So essentially, what happens for those who've never seen it before, the Doctor and Mel rock up in a future version of B-Jams, which is an old history version of Iceland, the shop, and they decide to buy lots of frozen food, including chips and peas and scampi, because it's really important.
Stop it.
What?
B-Jam.
Do you remember? Were you around when B-Jams were there?
I'm nearly as old as you.
Yes, the big old freezer centre. Yeah, we bought our first microwave from B-Jams. So actually, that's what it is, mate. It is B-Jams in space in the future.
Did you defeat a Dalek with it?
What?
Little resolution humour for you all there.
Indeed. So anyway, so they rock up to fill up the TARDIS freezers with peas and chips and Yorkshire puddings and all kinds of lovely frozen food. And there they come across an old chum of theirs, Sabalom Glitz, who some of you may remember from the other far future story in the Andromeda Galaxy, which featured robots and some people from the Carry On films. But that's a whole other story from a whole other Doctor. Anyway, back in B-Jams on Space, they meet Sabalom Glitz, this bit of a rogue geezer. He's got a treasure map and he wants to find the treasure, which is guarded by a mysterious fire-breathing dragon. Lo and behold, they all set off to find the treasure, but who will get there first? I don't know, to be honest. It's something
Kane,
like that.
the bad guy,
Oh, and there's Kane as well.
Yes,
Kane, the bad guy.
He was so bad, he was good. This is a sort of
really
I
good.
mean, like, he was a good bad guy. This is a sort of a kind of a bit of a mashup of stuff with this one, isn't it? With the dragon and the ice world, and it's kind of a bit sci-fi and a bit fantasy.
It's all kinds of things. I mean, on paper, the first level of it is a treasure hunt. It's that classic story. X marks the spot.
He literally has a map like that, doesn't he?
He literally has a map.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And obviously there are other people out to get the treasure for their own different ends. Bit of fun. But on a secondary level, it's also, as you said, Geoff, goodbye to one companion, the lovely Mel, and hello to another companion, the lovely Ace. And they couldn't actually be more different, I think, these two companions. I mean, I love Bonnie Langford to bits, and I think she was horribly serviced by the character of Mel. There was nothing to it, really. I think her characterization might have been written on the back of a packet of Rossman's back in 1982 or 3 or whenever it was.
She had a cracking scream on her, didn't she?
She did, and that's it. And it's that kind of, somebody in a production office in the 80s thought, Doctor Who companions, all they do is scream. Weren't they really good screamers, back in the day when I was a kid? And I think, actually, the only one who really, really screamed was Victoria Waterfield. Everyone else kind of, yelped a little bit, but Victoria was OTT. And likewise, Mel was OTT. She screams at everything. Oh my goodness.
That was what struck me, is that she just shrieks. And the sad thing is that you can tell she's enjoying being there and working with Colin and Sylvester. But the character
is awful. And this is the great thing about Big Finish, because Big Finish have done really good things with her character. But on TV, sad to say, we never saw that until, actually, I think, I'm going to propose this one, we never saw any depth to Mel until we got to this story, which is her last story, I think.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I know it's her last story. What I think is this is the first time we actually saw any depth to her character on the telly. Am I making sense?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
You sure? I don't know. I don't know if I'm coming or going.
So we'll talk about Ace in a bit, the lovely Ace. And I made some notes whilst I was watching the episode in the fashion of yourself. So the episode opens with Kane and a bunch of lackeys standing there who are going to get put into Cybermen style freezing tomb type things or something or other. Now they actually stand there and they tell these lackeys that they've been hired to strike fear and terror into people's hearts. Yes. That is their actual job description.
That's their actual job description. Yeah. I need people to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Can you strike fear into someone's heart? Can you strike terror? You're hired. So I quite liked all the stuff about liquid nitrogen here, because it reminded me of one of the greatest movies of all time, which hadn't actually been made by this time this episode went out. But there you go. Kane, not freezing and stuff, and needing to stay cold was quite a cool idea. Forgive the pun. Now I've also written here Asteroid Express card with a little crying, laughing face.
Asteroid Express card.
I think when they were at the bar just after they've met Sabalom again, someone wants to pay on Asteroid Express. I can't remember if it was the Doctor or someone.
You've got good eyes.
And that made me think of a bit of an RTD style gag that is the sort of thing he might have done, a bit of a pun like that.
Very possibly. Yeah. Yes.
And then I've got it's a literal Iceland shopping centre planet.
B-Jams.
And the
Iceland bought out B-Jams, so you're not far wrong.
I remember that, yeah. So I've written here, the Deep Space Freezer ship of food reminded me a bit of the 10th Doctor and Rose Big Finish story with the Ice Warriors, which is called Cold Vengeance, with the Ice Warriors in, and the pair of them end up on essentially like an Ocado van in space with frozen food on it. And they've ended up with like Vice Warriors frozen, and of course they start getting out and stuff. So that element of it made me think about that. So what did you think of this episode overall?
So if you may indulge me, if you may allow me to travel back through the mists of times as to when this story first aired, because I do remember it very well. I was taking my GCSEs at the time. Yeah, they were. Was it GCSEs? Yeah, some were, and some were O levels. Yeah, that's it. I was the last year to take O levels and the first one to do GCSEs. Yeah, they experimented on my generation, mate. So as future generations could have the benefit. Anyway, I remember it being out, but I also remember being really weirded out by this season anyway, right? Because it's, anybody sort of watching it now would think, what the hell is this? Because it is very, very strange. We start this season with Time in the Rani, which some people say is a lot of fun. I'm not a big fan of it, but appreciate that it does have some good qualities to it. I really didn't like it at the time, but I loved Sylvester McCoy, and his Doctor throughout this season became, for me, much more defined and just better as he went along. It's like he grew into the role in these first few stories.
His performance in Dragonfire, felt more what I...
It's awesome. But to be honest, it changes massively between Time in the Rani and Paradise Towers, which is, only the second story in this season. So So by the time we get to Dragonfire, we have a really self-assured Doctor. That's not to say he's not prone to the kind of slapstick comedy, and there's a fair bit of it in here, but it's tempered by the sense of a really keen intelligence. And McCoy was one of those, like all of them really, who just flips on a sixpence. You know, he can go from being an absolute clown to someone who's deadly serious and will stare you in the eye and reach into the darkest depths of your soul to play chess with it. He would do that. And this is the story where I think we first start to see that. I think he's really good. So when I watched this as a 16-ish year old, I think I was. So I was just doing my exams and everything. And I remember getting to this story and thinking, wow, this is it now. The Seventh Doctor has actually landed, because we'd started the season with what I thought was an absolutely awful story. I didn't really enjoy Paradise Towers that much at the time either, though I love it now. Delta and the Bannermen, I've never been a massive fan of, but I do kind of like it. It's still got a very big size 10 foot in time in the Rani to me. I think they all get a bit carried away with being on holiday in Wales, and the story just completely runs away. But Dragonfire, suddenly, it's a really, really intelligent story. It's not without some flaws, I don't think, but when I first watched it, I thought it was absolutely epic. And I've seen it a few times. In fact, I've seen it a lot since, and I still think it's absolutely epic. There are some weird moments which we'll come to, I'm sure, but it's just one of those stories. It's the story at the end of a season that suddenly seems to have righted itself. If you imagine we're on a boat, and the boat's kind of been tipping left and right, or starboard to port, or whatever the terminology is, and suddenly we have a good hand on the steering device, and we're going straight. What's that word? The steering thing, the wheel. We have a good hand on the tiller. Oh. That's what I'm getting at. We have a sudden hand on the tiller, and it's straight ahead honcho to waters hitherto uncharted, I would say.
Yeah, this felt really like it was finding its feet, and I wonder whether part of that was Ace coming in and Mel going.
Well, I think what it is that, but that is where I think this is the story where the influence of Andrew Cartmel is really now fully grounded. He'd inherited the script for Time in the Rani, and I think he's gone on record a few times as saying he disliked it. It wasn't his cup of tea, I think, putting it mildly. But it was already in production. It had already been signed off, and it was already, being committed to. So it had to be done. He found is it Stephen White who wrote Paradise Towers? He found Malcolm Cole who wrote Delta and the Bannermen, and of course he found Ian Briggs who wrote this story, Dragonfire. And what they had, they kind of formed something a bit like a writer's room. It wasn't quite a writer's room, but it was at least a place where everyone kind of pitched in with ideas, and we started to see how those ideas would be threaded, not at this point, but eventually they would get to be threaded throughout the whole, the remainder of the Seventh Doctor era. And this is where we start to see the embryonic phase, if you like, of what's come to be known as the Cartmel master plan. At the time, it wasn't any kind of Cartmel master plan. It wasn't any sort of plan at all. It was just Ian Briggs and Andrew Cartmel trying to find some sort of history for this new companion that they'd kind of planned out together, and decided that she's not going to be a screamer. She is going to be an intelligent girl about town, and she's going to be kind of contemporary and have some contemporary language about her, which again we'll probably talk about. But it suddenly felt to me, when I first watched this, that not so much finding its feet as suddenly having found its feet, as being something now that I can actually proudly say, wow, this is good. I'm a fan of this stuff. It's suddenly getting good. But it was only 3 episodes, and we had to wait forever for the following season. And wow, the following season kicked off with Remembrance of the Daleks. So you put these two stories back to back, and it's an incredible run of Doctor Who, that I don't think we'd seen until that point. Certainly for my generation, anyway. It was, I got really strong. I mean, the model work, the image of Svartos and the ice world part of it. You know, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, for ages we'd had really ropey, like, I don't know what they were, sort of cardboard cutouts of planets balancing on string. And this was something that was in 35mm film in slow motion, and, you know, really beautifully lit. And it looked like it was, you know, trying to compete with the movies. You know, it couldn't really, but at least they were trying, and they knew what they had to do, and they were starting to, you know, to make those things, you know, put those practices in place.
One of my notes was that I thought this one had great sets to it, and, you know, a sense of
beautiful sets,
you know, trying to you know, stretch that budget and yet, you know, lift up the production values on it, you know. And they sort of started it a bit with Colin, didn't they? You know, there's that great you know, model shot of one of the space stations.
Oh, the Time Lord space station. Yeah, well, I think they spent all their budget on that, didn't they?
You know, it looked great.
They didn't have any money for anything else, sadly.
Fair play to them for trying to, you know, push this as far as they could go. I really enjoyed this one. I think you know, I liked the sort of bit of mishmash of, you know, the dragon element, the treasure quest, and sort of you know, the science fiction element to it as well. We'll talk about Ace in a bit, but I thought Kane was a really good baddie. Like I said earlier, he's quite sadistic, and, you know, there's a bit where very sadistic. Like he has the one of the assistants wants the ship. Is it Sabalom's ship? And he has it blown up just to spite them, just because he can, you know. And he's quite horrible, really. And then of course, it's quite an infamous moment, isn't it, when he gets a little bit hot and bothered, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of freaky. And again, actually, I mean, that was a great ending for me. I love that.
Yeah,
you know, it's a big fan of Raiders.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah,
sort of Doctor Who doing the same
indie
kind of effect, and doing it pretty well as well.
You can see why Mary Whitehouse was probably furious.
I don't think they cared about her.
No, it didn't look like it. No. So there was lots of bits in here that I really liked. So some of my notes are things like when they leave the cafe, the Doctor and Sabalom. He goes the wrong way, and then he doubles back to follow Sabalom. And there's someone with a baby alien, and he goes to pet it, and it snaps at him. And you know, he kind of flinches.
Bit of improv,
it's a lovely little moment there, I thought. And then at the end of the first episode, I think we should talk about the literal cliffhanger.
Do we have to?
I've written
that is pretty awful, isn't it?
Why is he doing that?
Nobody knows, right? If you, I don't know if you've. When I watched this the other night, I listened to the commentary, which I hadn't done before, and I mean, I've read up on this and all sorts, but Chris Clough, the director, he holds up his hands and says, "Yep, it was my fault. I don't know what happened, but it did." And Ian Briggs, the writer, is kind of like, "This isn't what I wrote." It's like, I wrote that. They were going from a set. There was no way forward. There was no way back. The Doctor had to do something, you know. But whatever happened afterwards, that wasn't part of it, you know. And Chris is like, "Yeah, I know. And what can I say? You know, we all got carried away." But the thing is, it's like, what clearly when you listen to the stories about it, they spent time on constructing the logistics of that. That climb down the cliffside. Do you know what I mean?
Like that there, and you know,
and nobody stopped to think, this doesn't make any sense. There's nothing good about this.
They were so far along that they were like, we can't go back.
Yeah, that they couldn't stop it. The motion was just going. But I do remember this actually. You know, from a pretty good setup in episode 1, and just suddenly losing the will to live at that literal cliffhanger, because it was so awful. And the actual cliffhanger, as scripted, was a few minutes before that, where the dragon, the biomechanoid, faces off against Ace and Mel. I nearly called them Mace. I nearly shipped them as Mace. That would be a thing.
There might be a Mace fandom.
That might be a thing. But and there again, you see that, and that's a good moment, because there you get the difference between Ace and Mel, because all she does is scream into Sophie's ear, almost literally deafening her.
Yeah.
But yes, that cliffhanger, there's nothing to say about that, Jeff. It's awful. We know that. The production crew know it. The actors know it. We're all complicit in letting it happen, and it's happened. So we just have to move on.
It's got a charm to it.
Oh, that's nice of you to say so.
So I've got a note here. Did Clara show Glitz the way to the doctor to help him?
She did appear in this story, didn't she? Later on in... Yeah, this is one of her shadows or something.
In Time of the Doctor, wasn't it? Yeah, it was one of her echoes. Yeah. Because he shows up to get the doctor, doesn't he? And in my headcanon, she's obviously showing him the way to go.
Where would the Doctor be without Clara? Hey, he'd never have picked up the TARDIS. No. He'd never have found his way in Dragonfire and whatever else.
I stand by Clara being the most important companion to the Doctor. And whilst we're at it,
that's interesting.
Why don't we talk about Jenna for a little while? So I've got a note here, another one. Metaphysics joke. I don't know why I've put that there, but there was a joke in here that made me laugh because it was quite clever. Do you know the one I'm talking about? Is
that the part in part 2 when the Doctor is trying to...
No, it is part 2, yeah.
It is in part 2 when they need a distraction. There's a guard at the door, and Glitz has got to get in behind him. So the Doctor's got to distract the guard, and he says something like, "Well, they engage in some kind of existentialist discussion, don't they?" I can't remember exactly how it goes, but did you write it down?
Wrote, the chat with the security guard. I didn't get it, and then I put metaphysics joke. So we'll move on from my stupidity there. And then I've also got a note. I'm not sure Sylvester was expecting those sparks to be quite so big, which is when they go and they try and blow up the frozen ice bit or the door or something, and all the sparks come out.
Oh yeah, they really knacker him up, don't they? See, in those days, mate, health and safety was somebody else's problem.
Yeah,
they didn't worry about it at all. Yeah, just throw some sparks at the actors. That'll be fine. It's really, some of that stuff is, you think, oh my gosh, nobody's...
It wouldn't happen now, would it?
No, health and safety would have a field day.
Also, the Doctor must have had extraordinarily slippery shoes as well when he's in the snow and the ice.
So he's the only one doing the ice acting, isn't he? I think the others start to do it maybe tentatively and then just give up, recognise it's a studio floor. But no, kudos to McCoy for going all the way.
Yeah, exactly, He was, he went full method with
full
that.
method, full on with that one.
Good for him, yeah. So I've got that. The dragon looks brilliant. I really like, the giant sort of head. Carapace.
That'll do, something like that.
And then it's got the sort of pipey type ridge spike things down its back, and it looks very much like the alien from the
eponymous
film. That's the one. And then my first note for episode 3 is it now turns into aliens with the guards looking for the dragon and finding the girl brackets mute.
Yeah.
So there's obviously some
influence
there. I think, yeah. And in fact,
when was Aliens out? You're a Cameron fan. You can tell me straight away. Aliens was 1984, was it?
85, 86, I think.
85, 86.
Wasn't 84 was Terminator. 86, yeah.
1986.
Yeah, so they would have. So when did this go out?
This went out in. I think this went out in 86.
So it's certainly the design.
Or was it
it looks like the alien. And it's quite possible they'd seen aliens and took a bit of a influence from it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't doubt it actually, but I mean, you think about it again. Like aliens was such a big thing back in those days. I mean, it changed. I don't need to tell you this. You're a Cameron fan. You know what he did for cinema. And that was one of the key movies that did for it.
He's still doing it today,
well,
and
don't know. Sorry, go on. Did I say that out loud?
December 21st.
Yeah.
So I've also got a sort of question here, which is why does Mel want to go? The Doctor doesn't want her to go, and it was quite a sort of touching little end. He didn't want her to leave, did he? But it didn't feel clear why she wanted to go. I guess the danger of it all, got on a bit much.
Yeah, I mean, back in those Yeah, in the classic series, few companions got a decent exit, did they? Really,
Well, it
they
was
kind of
really
just
only
sort of,
Joe and Sarah Jane,
yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah. There weren't many that got anything like a sort of properly built up, carefully constructed exit. And to be fair, though, I mean, Mel's entrance was a little bit chaotic as well, because I've always struggled to kind of reconcile this, because she appeared in Trial of the Time Lord, right? And she was a future companion of the Sixth Doctor. So when the Sixth Doctor put his case for his defence as the Terror of the Vervoid section of that story, we didn't know who the companion. He was already there with Mel. He'd already met her and done a few adventures, and they were sort of well in with each other by that point. But then she gets thrown back into the space station, the Time Lord space station, right? I.e., from the future, to pair up with the Doctor, the Sixth Doctor, who hasn't actually met her yet. He's only seen her the way we've seen her in the Terror of the Vervoids, and she stays with him presumably, and now she's left him without ever actually having met him. Bizarrely, I don't get it.
Yeah, it was quite a clever idea for a bit of timey-wimey.
It was a good idea. It's a good idea, just poorly executed, I think. It's just one of these things that is done for effect, rather than with any real thought behind it. And again, this is a difference. This is why Dragonfire is different, because, right? There's a scene in part 1, right, where Ace is telling us a bit about her history and how she got there. And there's this whole thing about, Time Storm sort of swept me away. It's all a bit Wizard of Oz kind of thing, right?
Oh, you beat me to it. It was a Wizard of Oz nod.
Mate, it's more than a nod. It's more than a nod. Yeah. It's an absolute proper head wobble, and not just in there either. But yes, definite Wizard of Oz stuff. But this whole thing about the time storm and the explosion in the art room and all that kind of stuff, right? So one of the guys in the commentary says to Ian Briggs, "Did had you worked out Ace's story? Aside from that, the fact she was going to end up being a pawn of Fenric and all this sort of stuff." And it's like, well, no, I hadn't. Nobody had really at that point. But the difference is, right, so when you compare to Mel's story, right, so Mel's kind of thing is she's a companion from the future and she knows a thing or two about computers, right? But that's as far as that ever went.
Also, she's from
Pease Pottage,
and
Ace is from Perivale. That's amazing. But the thing is, they went somewhere with Ace. They explored that backstory. It gave her a reason for things to do in this story and in in future stories. It was always part of her character, and they added to it. They kept adding to it. They kept layering it on, and Sophie kept taking it and running with it. And you can sense the two of them, Sylvester and Sophie, really going for this stuff with the writing team just providing them fuel, just shoveling it in, and they're going at it like a steam engine, just down these rails.
She really is the first of the classic companions that had what
technically she's the last of the classic companions, isn't she, really?
Yes, I was going to say, but she was the first right at the tag end.
I don't know, mate. No,
I suppose Joe did,
definitely did. Yes, but again, it wasn't a constructed thing as such. It kind of evolved, as I think Ace's character evolved, through the writing, through the performance of, the actor and all that stuff, whereas, okay, now it's maybe a little bit more contrived at times, or it has been a little bit contrived. I think definitely with Clara, it was attempted. There was some sort of contrivance there, and for me, it didn't really go anywhere, and then it changed. And then just when you think that's good, it changed again. So whatever planning they had, it was all thrown out the window at some point. And Clara's had more reboots than my
Geoff
shoes.
has left the chat.
You started it.
No, I do
but
agree.
No, you're right. Ace does have...
Clara is... sorry. I'm back onto Clara. Clara's a character of, I was going to say two halves, but it's more like multiple parts, really.
It's more like multiple parts.
Because when she was with the 11th Doctor, that's where you kind of see how important she is to the Doctors across time. But she didn't really become a fully kind of fleshed out character until Series 8, when she was with 12. So anyway, I can see with Ace, where Russell T Davies took inspiration for Rose from, and the general way his reboot of the show. It's not really the right word, is it? But where a lot of the influence came from. She's even. Where did I make my note? There's a lot of sort of similarities. With Rose. She's got a dead end job, and wants more of life, but also quite quickly you realise actually, I think she's unlike any of the other companions because she's really quite sort of feisty, and she throws the milkshake on the customer, and won't take any grief over it, and she's obviously, she's clever. In a sort of street smarts is such a lame term, but you know what I mean. She's obviously not kind of a university educated character or something like that, but she's an ideal fit for the Doctor, and you can see why he takes her along at the end. I just Sophie is just you can see again why people love her, because immediately she owns the role. She's confident in it.
She does.
Great fun, really kind of sparky and feisty, like I said, but also quite you kind of empathise with her a bit, when she goes back to her room with Mel.
Yeah.
You get the bit of the backstory.
I love that scene.
And it's quite sort of sort of moving, really. She's been displaced from home and doesn't really know anything about kind of what went on with it. And one of my notes, it was Ace is a feminist. Love it. I can't remember quite why I wrote that, but I thought it was cool. And I noticed actually she had a Batman earring. Did you ever notice that?
Yeah. I did notice that.
So that was quite fun. I mean, it's the wrong comics brand, but whatever.
But again, that's Ace, isn't it? She's eclectic like that. She just collects badges. Yeah,
and things, she has so much personality. With the leather jacket and the badges on her and everything. And when we talked with Sophie, and people might have heard this before, or they can hear it on next week's podcast.
Indeed, they can.
How the role came her way, and there's quite a good story about that. I'm not going to spoil it, and how she got involved with it all. But yeah, Ace is she's just great, and I really enjoyed her a lot in this, and in her subsequent ones. Fabulous. And I'm having watched this one again, and in no way being influenced by having spoken to Sophie, I'm really excited to see Ace coming back in the show. And definitely. We've talked a bit about this before, but I read At Childhood's End, which is the book that she wrote, and which was before we knew she was coming back to the screens. But that was great to kind of catch up with the character again, and bring her into the modern era. So yeah, having her come back to actually be on screen again is going to be great. Really looking forward to it.
It's fabulous. Can't wait.
So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this episode. It had a literally ropey, dodgy cliffhanger at the end of episode 1. I don't care. It's quite charming.
It doesn't spoil the story, does it?
Is there anything I didn't like about it? No, not really. I feel that.
No, the same actually. I mean, you can tell in a way that it's a season 24 story as opposed to a couple of years on, when they, when the stories start to get really quite dark and quite into Ace's backstory. They, what happened to her in the past drives the stories that we go through. But here, there's still a bit of glitz, literally. In the form of, Tony Selby. But I mean, the sets are really brightly lit. Arguably, they could be a little bit darker, but it doesn't, it doesn't spoil it. There is a certain frothiness, I think, to season 24. It is so light-hearted, and it's so fun, and it's kind of mixed, like I said earlier, you go from Time and Arani to this, and there's a lot between them, but they're still linked. There's kind of an umbilical cord that goes from the first to the last story of this season.
Yeah. Well, you can sort of see the things are developing across it. And, you said earlier you didn't like Time in the Rani, and no, I watched it recently, and I enjoyed it. I think I feel like, you know, almost everything we talk about, I'm like, yeah, it's great, I loved it, but you know, I do, and I even though like
I tell you what, I mean, I know we're not talking about Tywin Irani, but you know, again, at the time, I loved. There's a certain energy about it that I still enjoy, you know, because it seemed. I think, do you know, honestly, with the different titles at the start of the show, you know, they're very of their time. These, you know, this exploding starfield, the swirling galaxy, you know, those sort of early days. Computer graphics, you know, computer aided design. Literally, I think it took the guy like 20,000 years to make that frame by frame. You know, almost as long perhaps as it took the sculptor in Dragonfire to make that image of that sculpture of the big lady with the big pants. You know, so and there are things like that. But do you know, Tywin Irani has a weird sort of energy to it, which I really kind of latched onto. I think the script itself. My God, I think it's an absolute beast to get through. But the story's not half bad. The story is just like a standard Doctor Who with a nice edge to it. But I find the dialogue the most awful thing about it, and you can't make people say those things. But anyway, that's that. Yeah. You know, the rest of the season kind of, you know, finds its feet, and by Dragonfire, it's there.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Dragonfire. I feel like I should say something, you know, criticize it and find something wrong with it, but why? You do I need to talk about that? You can watch something and you can analyze it and find things that could be better, but I enjoyed it, and that's what matters.
Yeah, the same actually, and I know we kind of alluded to him as well, but Kane, you know, played by Edward Peel. Now, it's again with these kind of baddies. Edward Peel decides to play it really straight down the line, doesn't he? You know, he's underperforming. You know, he's underacting. He's just, you know, he's dripping with menace. Every word is measured and calm.
A sadistic character, and you're right. That could easily have been quite pantomime in a way. Yeah,
it could have been totally pantomime, couldn't it? If you look at Richard Briers as the chief caretaker in Paradise Towers, he plays it totally like that. It's completely over the top, although bizarrely I kind of enjoy that as well. I think it sort of suits the bizarreness and the weirdness of the story. Here, I think, you know, given that we're in a freezing cold environment, that Kane is a kind of vampire creature, and that he's I think as Ian Briggs describes him as a collector of lost things. He has a hypnotic kind of power. You know, it's sort of a pervading poisonous influence over people who are just looking for something to latch onto in their lives. He's a very modern day villain from that perspective. He's he's very much a psychopath. You know, in that he's controlling, he's manipulative, and all he wants to do is, as you said, strike fear and terror into the hearts of people. Why? Don't know. Don't think it's ever really explained. But in a way, it doesn't matter. He just wants to do it.
That's one of my other notes.
So cruel.
Was what was the point of his quest? You know, it wasn't really clear.
Honestly, I really don't know. It's probably explained in there somewhere, but I think I just look at other things. My attention's never really been drawn to that. I don't know why. I mean, he puts it in the middle of his, when he finally gets hold of the Dragonfire crystal, he puts it in the middle of his console thing, and it does stuff. But, you know, presumably it was going to give him absolute power. But then you get that brilliant moment. Oh my God, this is another thing that almost exemplifies or typifies the Seventh Doctor's era. When Sylvester McCoy is on form, my God, he's on form. And when he's got somebody to play off against, like Edward Peel, they just that scene in part 3 where McCoy is talking him through, or the Doctor really, I should say, is talking him through not doing what he should be doing. You know, it's like he's holding up his ghosts for him to see and face, confront, and in the end, he's talking him into being a failure. So he's got no other choice really but to literally commit suicide. He opens the screen, he exposes himself to the sun, and we go all Raiders of the Lost Ark after he's pretty much killed everybody on the planet. So it's but the mad thing is, I found out from listening to the commentary that both of them couldn't stop laughing. They were corpsing throughout the whole thing. And Edward Peel says, he goes, if you look at my eye line, he says it's right up at the gantry. Sylvester McCoy's like 3 feet below him because he's such a tall guy and Sylvester's so small. But he says, I couldn't look at him because every time I did, I just cracked up. And it was the same for him. So there were many takes of that scene, but you'd never know
I didn't even,
from watching as a viewer. It is just astonishing. And we get that bit also just before that where Peel is trying to take on Ace, isn't he? He's trying to get Ace to pick up the coin. And again, like you said, this great thing with Sophie, you can see it in her eyes. She's falling under. She's trying to fight it almost, but she's going with it. But at the end, she gives it up. We know she's in control all the time. Bilge bag, she says, picks it up and holds up a can of nitro night to threaten everybody with. That's why Ace is great.
It just the impression that she made in just this one story, you can see why she's still where she is.
It's all there, isn't it? It's all there. Everything that happens to Ace and everything she does in stories, that happen after this. The genesis of it is all here. The core, the key components are all there. She doesn't change who she is throughout her arc, but she finds out more about herself. She becomes stronger, but at her core, she's 100% Ace from start to finish, and that is fantastic.
We were just talking there about Kane and his I guess motivations, and his goal not being that clear, and but it not spoiling things, and it's made me think of Mission Impossible 3, and there is a point to this. So you haven't seen all of the films, and you're missing out.
I've seen the first 2 films. You know this because I texted you.
The first 2 are good.
Admitting my shame last night when you were so excited, when you were jumping up and down like
I'm a huge fan of
at the latest
Mission films. They are
flick.
Incredible. And in the third one, which is written and directed by J.J. Abrams, this is where you've been going along in so you've been going along in fifth gear in the second one, and then it cranks up to 6th in the third one, but then they find a magical 7th gear, and then they just keep going up where they're the speed and the I don't know what my metaphor's going here, but
it's a good one, speed related. Don't just go with that.
He's quite he's a really good director, I think, and Alias was a great show. I'm not sure his writing, it's a little bit Moffat in a way, actually, where there's really, really great ideas that don't always pan out properly. And it sort of happens in Mission Impossible 3, where they spend the film chasing something called the Rabbit's Foot, and you get this absolutely incredible action film that is laced with, a kind of a human element where Cruise's character's wife has been taken and stuff, and there's a bit of a jumbled time structure on it and stuff as well, which is quite cool. And then it gets to the end, and they've got the rabbit's foot back, and Tom says to Morpheus, he says, what was it? And he says, oh, I'll tell you later, it doesn't matter. And you go, what? The whole film, you've been chasing this thing, and you get to the end and they don't tell you what it is, but it literally doesn't matter, because the stuff with the characters and the action is more important than what this actual thing is.
That would piss me off.
But it probably would have done me normally, but after such a honestly, you've got to watch it after such a good.
After they've thrown all the sweets at you, all the eye candy that you can possibly feast on, you're so stuffed with it all that you don't notice these minor details.
Because you've just had so much good stuff coming before that. So
we should do a movies podcast, or maybe we should do some movies episodes, because I think some of these stories, because I think a lot of movies you and I enjoy are the same. Yeah. But I think there's also a bunch of movies where we are complete opposite ends of the spectrum, my friend, and we have some interesting discussions mining that middle ground, for sure.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we have talked about it before, movies corner to corner, but we haven't done it yet.
Movies corner to corner, yeah.
So maybe sometime.
That means buying another subscription.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
So kind of not sure the funds can reach that. Squeeze into this one or the other one, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, we're off topic, aren't we? Wildly off topic.
This was great watching this again, and discovering
really
Ace again.
Always enjoyed this.
Yeah, like you said earlier, Mel had this was probably her, best kind of character stuff. And actually, when she left, I did think
it really
actually,
was.
I kind of don't want her to go again. I've really enjoyed it.
Do you know what? Yeah, definitely. And I'm sort of dipping into our chat with Sophie actually, but I'm just going to say, that scene. Well, all Sophie's scenes with Bonnie are fantastic in here. They really are. Every time I watch this, I just think, if only we'd had a little bit more with Mel and Ace, because it's almost like they bring the best out of each other in some ways, And I don't know whether it's because of that or whether it's the writing or whether because Bonnie was more into it by then, but Mel just feels more like an actual proper character in this story to me. Even to the point where she doesn't scream at something, right? There's a sequence in part 1 where the little girl, the little girl in her Bugsy Malone, it's Bugsy Malone, isn't it? So Bonnie Langford was in Bugsy Malone as a 7-year-old, and the little girl in Dragonfire is wearing her Bugsy Malone outfit that she had lying around, apparently. It's true. It's a true story, right? Anyway, the little girl is wearing a sort of scary mask, and she pulls Mel's trousers or something. Mel turns around. She's about to go, and then she stops, almost like she catches herself. She stops not because she realizes it's a child. It's almost like she stops because she realizes I've screamed a little bit too much. At least that's how I read it, which to me is an intelligent decision born of the character. Now, just the previous story, Delta and the Bannermen, I think it's end of part 2. Is it part 1 or part 2? I think it might just be part 1, actually, when the alien child hatches out of the egg. Now, she knows it's an alien, right, in the egg, and she screams the place down when it pokes its little green face through the slime. And it's like, for crying out loud, this character has been travelling with the Doctor for years now, right? She's faced off all kinds of villains and aliens, and yet she still bloody screams. And that's no slight on Bonnie. That's entirely down to the writers deciding that that's a good idea for her to do. And this is the problem I think that Doctor Who had in the 80s. It still had one foot very firmly in the past, but it wasn't like it was actually the real past. It wasn't like the real sort of Doctor Who that happened. It was somebody's idea of what they felt happened. They all used to scream in the old days. No, they didn't. I was going to say,
it's one of those things that somehow becomes kind of public and common perception and knowledge.
It does, and it's not actually true. It's like a modern myth. They all scream in Doctor Who. Well, no, they don't. There are some screamers, but, things are starting to get a little bit more sophisticated, including the audience in the 80s, and yet they still decided on occasion to give them this stuff. And that moment in Dragonfire where Mel decides not to scream, I don't know if it's scripted, I don't know if it's improvised, and I don't know the reasons behind it, but in my head, I read it as something like an intelligent decision to not scream. Therefore, giving a little bit more depth to Mel's character, and I know I'm reaching for it here, right? But nonetheless, that's what I feel. And there's a more measured performance in Bonnie really throughout this, and Ace takes charge. Mel lets her take charge because actually I think that's Mel's character. She doesn't seem to be great at taking charge. She's quite easily led by other people. But at least in this one, she's led by Ace, who's a little bit rogue, actually quite a lot rogue. She'd go around blowing things up, and Mel seems to thrive in that. She seems to really enjoy being Ace's good buddy. You know what I mean? Like Ace is going to teach them stuff. I mean, she still sort of acts as a bit of a moral compass to Ace at times, but she's not. That story when in the bedroom when Ace tells Mel all about her, when she got, we referenced it a little while back, but Mel I think in the hands of any other writer would be quite judgy at that. But she's not, She lets Ace say her piece. She seems to empathise with her, and from that moment onwards, enjoys her company. And I would have loved to have seen maybe just one or two more stories for the two of them.
We could have together, had a bit more. But that thing of what people think and what they believe of something that isn't necessarily right. It's like thinking about the Cybermen coming out of the water in the Thames or something. We all know it was the Ice Warriors.
That kind of thing, isn't it? Yeah. They terrified me when I was a kid. Yeah, that's because you were 4 years old.
And it was...
I'm not being funny, but they were still made of rubber. And you could still see the eyes and the teeth behind the mask, you know. It still looked like a rubber mask. Anyways. So, but yeah, I mean, it's another thing, isn't it? Because the creature in here, like you said, it's, you know, again, whenever I read the interviews, the backstage stuff, and I was listening to the commentary on it, you know, Chris Clough again is like, oh, that creature, you know, it was awful. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. You know, the guy we got turned out to be a lot shorter than the guy we'd originally hired, so the leggings looked... And it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like you said, Jeff, sometimes it just doesn't matter. You know, the story is good enough, and enough of it comes through the production to just... let me enjoy it.
I firmly believe that if you enjoy it, whatever it might be, that is really what matters. And this
especially in Doctor Who, especially in classic Doctor Who, because everything wobbled.
Yeah. And this thing about finding fault, or, you know, what could have been and what should have been, and, you know, that's not for me.
Well put, mate.
You know, I have a degree. I have boiled it down to that's not for me.
See, because I watched this when it came up in a Blu-ray collection, and I did a little thread on it, which I'm just trying to see if there's anything on there that's interesting that we haven't talked about. Actually, my wrap up from that was from my tweeted thread on the 14th of August 2021. Is that I remember in 87 going from the embarrassment of Time and the Rani to the sheer jubilation on Dragonfire's climax. After a shaky start to its 24th season, my favourite show seemed to be gaining an intelligence and a new energy that would surely see it continue long into the future. That's what I tweeted out at the time.
You were half right there. It didn't continue long into the future, sadly.
It didn't continue long. Well, you say that, you know, that kind of that vibe continued in the New Adventures. Yeah, kept the show alive, kept it interesting to all, you know, the sort of growing adolescent fans when they reached their 20s and beyond, and some of them even went into TV because of it. You know, Paul Connell and obviously Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat, a few of those. You know, they all went along those lines, and it's largely because of what started in this story, I would say. You know, yes, there was Doctor Who before it, but this is when we suddenly saw that it could have a contemporary vibe to it. It could have modern characters, you know. And at the end of this era, we get something, you know, we get a story that is partly set in a council estate, a block of flats in middle London or something, isn't it? Yeah. So, you know, it starts here. It really you know, does. The modern era of Doctor Who starts right here. In this story, in B-Jams in space. That's what I'm going to close on right there.
Well, did you say we had some tweets about the episode?
Yes, not so many, but we do have a few. So we've got, who's this here now? 60second Who, who's at 60sec who says... McCoy doesn't overdo the slipping on ice. Everyone else underdoes it. Yes, quite right too. The dragon is amazing. Capital letters. Then we get ... and then from the neck up. The little girl and her mother really add nothing. The pre-recorded info dump part of the plot needed breaking up. Now, do you know what? I've got to just pick this one up here. The little girl and her mother really add nothing. I disagree with that.
Ace and what she's like.
Well, I don't know if. Yes, maybe they do, but I think what it is, it's like I don't know. I cannot put it into words. There's okay. So there is a really nice sequence which I think is only in the extended version. I think it's one of the scenes that got cut. There's a lot of scenes in this that got cut, and it happens, I think, in part 3 when the little girl is sort of wandering around the space station, and it's everyone's been killed or they ran away or whatever it is, and she wanders into Kane's sanctum, you know, with those weird sort of Emerald City Cathedral pipes over his sarcophagus, and just the sheer innocence of having that tiny little frail girl there in the realm of this monster is really quite chilling. And there's a part where he wakes up, the lid on his sarcophagus rises, he sort of slides his legs out, and she's right there with her teddy bear kind of smiling at him. And the way it's lit and the way Edward Peel plays it, and all he does is just kind of stare at her for a few seconds, and she stares back at him with a big cheesy grin. My heart was in my mouth for a moment right at that scene. And I know she doesn't get killed or eaten or anything like that.
You don't know.
But the terror, the iciness, the coldness, and I think it's that sort of thing that, you know, when you get that picture of innocence juxtaposed with the absolute cold evil of someone like Cain, that's when these things add something. You know, they don't add anything in terms of character. They don't really add something in terms of plot. But in world building, in giving you, maybe even if it's just a subconscious vibe that changes the texture or the colour of the story in a small way, it all adds up, I think. And that's what the little girl does.
It doesn't have to always add something. Does that bit of the doctor petting the little baby alien and it's snapping it? You know,
no, exactly. That's it. You can take those things out, and the story still continues. The plot isn't changed, and all that stuff. It still happens.
Have you ever seen Almost Famous? It's a Cameron Crowe film.
I haven't seen
it. It's a good film. I haven't seen it in a long time, but there's a bit in it that always sticks in my head. So it's about a boy who goes on tour with a famous band, and starts writing for Rolling Stone, and I can't remember which character it is, but they're discussing, I think it's like a Marvin Gaye song or something, and they're talking about the song, and there's a bit in it when he goes, woo, or something like that, and they say that's the bit that makes the song. You know, it's that little bit, and that actually always stuck in my head because it's so true. You know, when you're hearing a song, it can be, you know, a great song, and then something happens in it, a little bit of guitar flourish or vocal thing or something like that that just, for some reason, takes it up a bit, and it's these moments in TV and film are the visual equivalent of those bits in a song, you know. And
I
there's a
agree.
U2 song where if you listen really carefully, you can hear the drumsticks get dropped in the backing track, and then it's just cymbal just for a moment before he's obviously picked up his replacement drums and carried on. And of course, you know, they didn't have to leave that in there, but it's been left in there because it adds something, you know.
It does. It gives a bit of character to the thing, doesn't it?
So that Almost Famous moment, if anyone listening has ever seen that film, it's a great film. They'll know what I mean. I shall
look out for that one. So we have a couple more to. Okay. I'll just read a couple more out here actually, because this is an interesting one given what you were saying there. This is from James H. Long COVID sucks. Yes, indeed it does, James. At fitgeek_UK, who says, I have one pet hate with this story that I don't expect anyone else to really share, which is the low temperature physics is really painful for me to sit through. The story is great, but it's a major struggle to avoid focusing on the errors, which is interesting given what we were kind of talking about just there, isn't it? But you know, for some people that is the case. You know, I know on a few things I watch, I do sometimes find it difficult to get past those. Most things I can just get past it, and if I love it enough, I don't care.
Suspend it,
On occasion, these things can get you, can't they?
Yeah.
Gremlins, just like that. We've also got Seventh Son, who is at Melis107, who came back and said, it's great! Second best in S24. Second best, Melis? Second best?
What their first best
I'd say it was the best, but I wonder what the first best is. Yeah, definitely. So, Seventh Son at Melis goes on to say, great monster, quotation marks, exceptional villain, Glitz, ace, the face melt scene. I watched it in one sitting last time. Thumbs up emoji from me. Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you very much there. So, yeah, interesting. But yeah, definitely a favourite of mine, Geoff. I've loved really it since 1987, 6 or whenever it was it went out, and I still love it just as much now.
I'd happily rewatch this one again. So, yeah, it's been great going back in time, and we should rewatch another classic soon. So thank you as always, dear listeners, for tuning in and tweeting in.
Thank you.
Stick with us as always, because we've got some great stuff coming up, and next week's episode will be our Sophie Aldred chat, and then we'll be back soon with more episode reviews, more guest chats, and a lot more as we explore the Whoniverse from one corner to the other and beyond.
That was beautiful. Look at that.
Mic drop. Boom.
Boom. Well done. Brilliant. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time.